They thought discarding you would cost them nothing, that you'd vanish quietly, lick your wounds in private, and return the moment they snapped their fingers. But here's the shift they never expected. You didn't disappear to be chased. You disappeared to remember who you were before you needed someone else's attention to feel like enough. Because real men don't go silent to provoke guilt. They go silent to reclaim their peace. Most people mistake silence for retreat. But in Stoicism, silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of clarity. It's not a tactic. It's a transformation. You don't vanish to hurt her. You stop orbiting to stop betraying yourself. And when your silence no longer performs, when it no longer hopes or checks or reacts, that's when it becomes something they can't decode and something they can't survive. Real silence is like a mirror turned backward. She doesn't see herself in your absence. She sees what she lost. And that reflection hurts more than rejection. So before you chase another apology, ask yourself, do you really miss her? Or do you miss the man you were before she left? Because what you're about to discover isn't just about going no contact. It's about why your silence stopped working and how to make it mean something again. So start this journey now. If you're done using silence as a strategy and ready to let it become your strength, like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever gone quiet only to realize they expected it. Drop a 2 if you're ready to stop being predictable and start becoming untouchable. And stay with me, because what you'll learn next is exactly why your absence didn't shake them. But your unavailability will. 1. They got used to your silence. There was a time when silence used to shake people. A time when pulling away made someone stop in their tracks. It created discomfort, uncertainty, even regret. But not anymore. Not with them. They left you like you meant nothing. No explanation, no closure, just a casual detachment. As if the connection you once shared could be discarded like a note crumpled at the bottom of a drawer. And what did you do? You followed the playbook. You vanished. You went no contact, blocked, unfollowed. You pulled back completely, hoping your absence would hit them harder than your presence ever did. That maybe, just maybe, they would feel the emptiness where you used to be. That silence would become your weapon. But here's the problem. They've seen that weapon before, and worse, they've already learned how to survive it. You weren't the first person to disappear after being hurt. You won't be the last. They've witnessed it. They've even caused it. And each time they studied how to prepare for it emotionally, like armor against the echo. They didn't panic this time, because they predicted it. Your silence, it didn't stun them, it reassured them. It told them, here we go again, another one who'll leave quietly and probably come back once they've cooled down. And that moment, that quiet moment where you thought you were building power, was the moment you actually gave it away. Because what is predictable is dismissible. What's expected loses its sting. You thought you were sending a message, but to them, you were just reading from the same old script. That's the danger of using silence as a strategy rather than a reflection of your growth. Because when you disappear as a tactic, not a transformation, they can feel it. They can sense that your silence still wants to be noticed. That it's just another attempt to provoke thought, regret, reaction. But silence rooted in longing isn't stoic. It's performative. You didn't disappear. You performed disappearing. And people have learned to ignore performances. You see, emotional manipulators don't fear silence. They fear unpredictability. They fear growth. They fear the moment they look at you and realize you're no longer looking back. But that's not what they're seeing now. They see your silence, but it's the same silence they've rehearsed with others and survived. So it doesn't scare them, it soothes them. Because in their mind, it confirms their control. They're just upset, they think. They'll reach out again. They always do. And that's the loop you're trapped in. Silence that used to sting now serves their ego. You became the dramatic pause before the inevitable return. The longer you repeat that cycle, the more predictable you become. And when someone can predict your silence, they stop respecting it. They stop fearing it. They stop feeling it. That's when silence becomes powerless. Let's be honest. Are you being silent because you've found peace, or are you still hoping they notice the emptiness you left behind? Because there's a difference. Silence from strength doesn't watch the phone. Silence from strength doesn't hope for a reaction. It simply exists, calm, grounded, undisturbed. But silence from pain, it lingers, it waits, it checks, it secretly begs, "Please notice I'm gone." And they know the difference. That's what makes it worse. This isn't about playing games. This is about reclaiming your energy, your presence, your self-respect. You don't need to vanish to matter. You need to evolve to be untouchable. That starts when you stop using silence as a tool for reaction and start treating it as a reflection of your peace. Because until you do, they'll keep brushing it off. They'll keep scrolling past your absence like it's just another mood you're in, just another tactic, just another delayed return. And that realization should wake you up. You're not just being ignored, you're being rehearsed. They've played this scene out before. In their mind, you vanish, you hurt, you heal just enough, and you come back. Maybe not to stay, maybe not with the same warmth, but enough to feed the cycle, enough to confirm they still mattered. And so long as your silence follows that rhythm, they win. So if you really want them to feel it, stop disappearing. Stay, but stop being available. Let your energy stay in the room, but not for them. Let them see you, but not reach you. Let them watch you and realize that nothing you're doing has anything to do with them anymore. That's the silence they're not prepared for, the one that doesn't scream or whisper or ask to be heard, the one that just is, still, rooted, free. So ask yourself, are you silent because you've grown past needing them, or are you still playing the role of the one who disappears just loud enough to be chased? Because if it's the second, they already stopped listening. But if it's the first, they'll feel that in a way they've never felt before. Not because you vanished, but because this time, you didn't come back. 2. Don't vanish. Detach differently. Disappearing is easy. Anyone can go silent. Anyone can block, unfollow, retreat into shadows. But detachment, true detachment, is not about absence. It's not about being unseen. It's about being unreachable. And there's a powerful difference. You've been told to go no contact, to disappear, to vanish so they'll miss you. And yes, sometimes silence is necessary, to heal, to breathe, to reclaim clarity. But silence isn't the goal. Detachment is. Because disappearing affects the eyes. Detachment affects the soul. They might not care that you're gone, but what shakes them is when you're still around, still visible, still present, but no longer emotionally accessible. They can see you, but they can't reach you. They can observe you, but nothing about you bends toward them anymore. That's what stings. That's what rewrites the power dynamic without saying a word. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to explain. You don't even have to change your routine. Just shift your energy, your availability, your intent. Let them watch you live. Let them scroll through your feed. Let them see your face, your movements, your smile, but give them nothing they can hold. No emotional clues, no bait, no hooks. Let your silence say, "I'm still here, but not for you." This isn't about bitterness, it's about sovereignty. It's not cold, it's clear. And clarity, to someone who once counted on your confusion, feels like rejection. Because in their story, you were always the one who reached out again. The one who asked if they were okay. The one who checked in, who left the door open, who posted something vague enough for them to assume it was about them. Even your absence used to orbit them. Even your silence used to seek their attention. But this time, your stillness isn't performance. It's presence, quiet, calm, unshaken. You're still visible, but you're no longer participating in their narrative. You're not playing roles anymore. You're not trying to make them feel anything. And that is what unnerves them. They don't miss your words. They miss your energy, your emotional availability, your predictability, your softness. So don't vanish. Don't run. Just stop feeding them emotionally. You don't owe them absence. You owe yourself evolution. And evolution doesn't need to scream to be seen. It just needs to stop explaining itself. This is where emotional detachment becomes spiritual. It's no longer about who follows who, or who posts first, or who blocks whom. It's about who has reclaimed their center, and who is still playing for validation. Let them see you, but not feel you. Let them notice that your captions don't carry weight anymore, that your presence isn't aimed at them, that your light is no longer a spotlight. It's a sunrise they weren't invited to witness. The power is not in removing yourself from their world. The power is in staying, and no longer orbiting theirs. You become emotionally untouchable, not in a toxic way, not in a spiteful way, but in a sovereign way. In a way that says, "I am no longer available for stories that diminish me." Psychologically, this is what's known as the reverse of the endowment effect. People overvalue what they think they still possess. But the moment they realize it's no longer theirs and never will be again, the true sense of loss hits. Not because you left, but because you stayed differently. And if you really want to embody that shift, start with the subtle signals. Let your digital presence reflect your new emotional frame. No vague quotes, no indirect messages, no passive-aggressive posts. Post with clarity, with presence, with focus on your own growth, not their reaction. When they scroll through your life, let them find light, but not warmth for them. Let them see freedom, not signals. Let them wonder, and never get answers, because detachment doesn't seek understanding. It doesn't try to be decoded. It simply becomes untouchable, not in body, but in energy. And in a world full of people who ghost and then return, block and then text, disappear and then resurface, you become something they're not prepared for. Someone who's still visible, but no longer theirs. Someone who didn't vanish, but transformed. Someone whose silence doesn't perform. It prevails. 3. Your calm is what breaks their ego. They were prepared for the old version of you, the one who cracked under silence, the one who posted cryptic quotes at 2 a.m., lingered on old photos, sent one last message just to be noticed. That version of you bled emotion in every digital breadcrumb, hoping they would follow the trail back to your heart. And in a twisted way, they found comfort in that, not because they cared, but because it confirmed one thing: they still mattered. But this version of you, the one who doesn't post out of pain, but from presence, the one who no longer flinches in silence, the one who's not hiding, just at peace, that's the version they never expected. Because they were ready for your sorrow, they rehearsed your regret, they built defenses for your sadness, but they weren't ready for serenity. They weren't ready for a stillness so unbothered that it makes them question whether they ever meant anything at all. You see, silence can mean many things. Sometimes it's a pause, sometimes it's a plea, sometimes it's a punishment. But true calm, that's different. It doesn't ask to be noticed. It doesn't carry weight. It doesn't cry out through coded messages or online presence. It just is. And when you start showing up with that kind of calm, clean, rooted, self-contained, it does something their ego never prepared for. It unsettles them because they can't decode it. They can't control it. They can't connect your stillness to a story that flatters their pride. They look for the signs. They search for the pain. But you don't give them anything to interpret. No sadness in your captions. No hidden meanings in your updates. You've stopped turning your emotions into clues for them to solve. And now, your silence isn't passive. It's strategic. It's sacred. This is the moment detachment becomes a mirror. Because when you stop performing your pain, they have no story to soothe themselves with. They can't say they're just hurt. They can't say they still care. They're just angry. Because what they're seeing now is something foreign. You moving on, without resistance, without revenge, without needing to be understood. And that's what truly haunts them. It's not that you're gone, it's that you're free. It's not your absence that breaks their ego. It's the presence you carry now that no longer orbits them. They didn't think you'd reach that place. They thought you'd stall in sadness, that you'd linger in longing, that you'd always leave the door cracked open just enough for them to re-enter when they got bored or lonely or curious. But you've sealed that door, not with noise, not with a goodbye post, but with nothing, with a peace that doesn't perform, with a presence that no longer looks over its shoulder. And suddenly they realize you're not on pause. You're not waiting. You're not watching. You're walking. That's what flips the dynamic, because now they're the ones refreshing. They're the ones wondering. They're the ones questioning. But every scroll, every click, every glance at your world leads to the same conclusion. You're no longer bleeding energy in their direction. And the more they try to read into your calm, the more confused they become. Because it's not indifference, it's not bitterness, it's something harder to swallow, irrelevance. You've stopped talking about them, not because you're suppressing pain, but because they're no longer part of your storyline. They're not the antagonist, not the muse, not even the footnote. They simply don't exist in the current chapter of your life, and that's when they start to feel the cost. Not of your silence, but of the story they told themselves about your weakness. They thought you needed closure, that you needed answers, that you needed them to see how much they hurt you. But you don't. You need none of it. Because peace doesn't chase recognition, it just rests in itself. Your stillness now has direction. It's not a reaction. It's not part of a strategy. It's just you, living. And the more they try to insert themselves back into your reality through subtle likes, passive pings, or distant reach-outs, the more obvious it becomes. You're no longer available, not emotionally, not energetically, not even subtly. And that's what breaks them. Not your rage, not your grief, but your groundedness. You've stopped making them the meaning of your silence. You've started making your silence the proof of your self-respect. And now, they're left standing in a void they created, looking into a mirror they can't bear to face. So ask yourself this the next time you go quiet. Are you pausing for them to catch up? Or have you finally arrived at a place they can't follow? Because there's a difference between silence that waits and silence that walks away. And they weren't ready for the second one, but that's exactly the one that sets you free. 4. Reverse the game without playing it. You don't win this by making bigger moves. You win by stepping out of the game entirely. They're not confused by silence anymore. They've seen that before, but what they didn't anticipate was your refusal to keep participating. That's when everything starts to break. Not through confrontation, but through quiet removal. They thrive on patterns, your reactions, your reach-outs, your need to be understood. They don't crave connection, they crave control, and they learned long ago how to survive your silence because they knew it wouldn't last. You'd always come back, even if just a little, a like, a story view, a message sent and deleted, a breadcrumb that said, "I'm still emotionally invested in you." But now the loop is broken. You're still there, but you're not reacting, you're not explaining, you're not giving them anything to decode, and your restraint, that shakes them more than any outburst ever could, because they're baiting you, testing with nostalgia, checking in with vague texts that sound harmless on the surface. Hey, just wondering how you're doing, but are really just probes, hooks wrapped in casualness, a way to see if they still matter, a way to see if you still bleed when they tug. But you don't bite, you don't offer closure, you don't seek it either, you just stay calm, clear, present, but detached. You didn't slam the door, you didn't yell, block, or burn it down. You just quietly changed the lock and never gave them the new key. And that subtle shift? That's what rattles them. Because for the first time, the rhythm is no longer theirs to control. The script they used to write, where they pull back and you chase, where they go quiet and you explain, is gone. The feedback loop is dead. And in its place is a silence that doesn't feel like tension. It feels like freedom. This is intermittent reinforcement reversed. They were used to emotional breadcrumbs. Sometimes you're close, sometimes you're distant. It kept them engaged. It kept them curious. It made them feel powerful. But now, there's no more sometimes. There's just presence without availability, and the unpredictability now belongs to you. They don't know what version of you they'll get, because you're no longer playing by their pattern. You've evolved past needing their validation, past proving a point, past seeking clarity from someone who only offered confusion. And that unsettles them more than you think. Not because you've gone cold, but because you've gone quiet in a way they can't touch. The silence isn't loud, it isn't reactive. It doesn't scream, "I'm hurt." It says, "I'm not here for this anymore." That's when the emotional power begins to shift, not through force, but through absence of need. You're no longer emotionally available for their storyline. You're not a character in their drama. You're not playing the role they once assigned you, the overthinker, the chaser, the safe fallback. You've left the board, and they don't know how to play without you. Now they're the ones watching, the ones wondering. They reach out, and your silence isn't filled with longing, it's filled with peace. And nothing disrupts a manipulative pattern more than a person who refuses to respond from pain. Your silence no longer waits, it leads. And you only break it from a place of clarity, not from loneliness, not from nostalgia, not from that ache to be seen. Because if your silence is rooted in the hope they'll chase you, they'll feel it, and they won't move. But if your silence is rooted in peace, they'll feel that too, and they won't know what to do with it. Because they don't know how to engage with a version of you that doesn't seek their attention. A version that doesn't flinch when poked. That doesn't shift just because they blink in your direction. You're not ignoring them, you've simply outgrown the game. You no longer post with a message for them between the lines. You no longer watch their stories with hope. You no longer adjust your presence to be visible to them. You're not trying to win, you're just not playing anymore. And that's what makes you powerful. The energy you once leaked into their world now stays with you, and they feel that loss, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped feeding them. They were used to being emotionally fed by your confusion, by your need for closure, by your craving for answers. But you've stopped asking questions. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped showing up where they used to expect you. Now your presence is steady, but your energy is gone. You're still visible, but you're not available. And they don't know how to reach someone who doesn't leave the door cracked open. So here's your compass. Engage only with clarity. If your silence is born from hope, keep it to yourself. But if it's born from peace, let it lead. Because you don't win this by playing it better. You win it by refusing to play it at all. 5. The power they lost was never you. It was access to you. You didn't walk away to prove a point. You walked away because there was nothing left to say, nothing left to explain, nothing left to give. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally realized that your care had become currency in a game you no longer wanted to play. They'll return eventually. Most people do, not out of love, but out of curiosity. Not because they suddenly see your worth, but because they feel the absence of the control they once had over you. It's not you they miss, it's the access, the emotional access, the predictability, the comfort of knowing that no matter how far they pushed, you would always be there, reacting, responding, waiting. But this time, everything's different. They come back and find no open door, no soft energy, no familiar response. It's not that you've become cold, you've become clear. You no longer waver. You no longer offer fragments of hope disguised as politeness. You don't seek closure or offer explanation. You've exited the emotional agreement without announcing your departure. And that kind of silence, the kind that doesn't reach back, doesn't blink, doesn't bend, shakes them far more than any confrontation ever could, because for the first time, they're not sure where they stand. They can't read you. They can't move you. They can't access the version of you that once made them feel central. And there's nothing more unsettling to someone who once felt entitled to your softness than realizing they've become irrelevant. You didn't turn this into a war. You didn't seek revenge. You simply stopped handing them the blueprint to your heart. You reclaimed what was always yours but constantly exposed, your peace. And peace, real peace, isn't quiet because it's hiding. It's quiet because it's whole. That's what they never expected. They thought you'd come back eventually, that you'd break the silence with a question, a memory, a moment of vulnerability. They thought time would soften you again, make you reachable again. But it didn't. Time didn't open the door. It sealed it. Not with anger, not with noise, but with clarity. You no longer carry emotional debt on their behalf. You no longer replay what you could have said. You no longer scroll for signs that they regret it. You're not building your life for them to see. You're building it because it finally feels good to build something that's yours again. And when they come looking for the old patterns, they find stillness. When they send a message, they're met with pause, not panic. When they test with bait, they're met with silence, not spikes of attention. Because you didn't just leave them behind, you left behind the version of you that needed them to understand. And now the imbalance is clear. The person who once chased is still. The person who once explained is done talking. The one who was once emotionally available is no longer even emotionally visible. That's what breaks them. Not your absence, but your detachment, because absence is something people can prepare for. They tell themselves stories. They're just taking space. They're just mad. They'll come back. But emotional detachment has no story, no timeline, no explanation. It just is. And it can't be unraveled because there's nothing left to hold. This is what freedom feels like. Not vindictive, not dramatic, just rooted, silent, whole. You're no longer waiting for them to realize something. You've realized it yourself. They discarded you without thinking. Now they live in the confusion your clarity creates. You didn't give them a scene, you gave them stillness. You didn't send a final message, you became the message. Because peace isn't the absence of emotion, it's the absence of emotional debt. You don't owe them your pain, you don't owe them your healing, you don't even owe them a goodbye. What they miss isn't your love, it's your availability. What they lost wasn't you, it was the privilege of access to the most vulnerable parts of you. So let them come back confused, let them scroll in silence, let them wonder if you still care. That's not your responsibility to answer. Your life has moved on without their approval. Your energy has shifted without their permission. And your silence isn't a cliffhanger, it's closure, without needing to be signed, sealed, or acknowledged. Because real closure doesn't come from them finally understanding what they had. It comes when you finally understand who you are without them, and you don't need them to witness it. They used to own your attention. Now they don't even recognize your energy. And that's the most painful truth they'll ever face. You didn't become cold. You just became untouchable. Let me speak to the man who's gone quiet and still hasn't been heard. You pulled back thinking they'd feel it. That silence would shake them like it once did. But the truth is, they didn't flinch. Because they've seen this before, and worse, they expected it. Your silence didn't surprise them. It reassured them that they still had emotional control. That's what happens when silence becomes part of a predictable loop. You disappear, hoping to be missed, but they're already playing the next scene in their mind. They think you'll be back. They assume your silence is temporary. And because they've rehearsed it, it no longer stings. It soothes them. That's the painful reality most men avoid. You think you're making a power move, but if you're still watching your phone, if you're still hoping they notice, you're not silent from strength. You're silent from need. And they can feel it, because emotional manipulators don't fear silence. They fear growth. They fear unpredictability. They fear the day you stop chasing and start evolving. So here's the truth I want you to sit with. Your silence only matters when it's real, when it's not a strategy, when it comes from a place that no longer requires validation or reaction. You don't need to vanish to be respected. You need to change how you exist. Stay in the room, but no longer orbit theirs. Let them see you, but not reach you. Let them sense you've stopped playing the same old part. That's what they don't know how to handle. Not your absence, but your unavailability. This is the shift. You stop being predictable and you become untouchable. So the next time you go silent, ask yourself honestly, am I doing this to be noticed? Or because I finally stopped needing to be? Because when silence is used as a weapon, they survive it. But when it becomes your new way of being, they feel it in ways they can't prepare for. Not because you left, but because you're never coming back as the same man again. If something in this message stirred you, don't just sit with it. Let it move you. Let it change you. Subscribe to Stoic Station and come back each week to sharpen your silence into strength.